beginning of the film is great, and I wanted to ask you about that. It starts out, and you're showing scenes of the city, and then scenes of Wrigley, and everything is really quiet. And then it becomes loud. And I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with that beginning? What do you think it means to you? Why did you do that?
Sure. To me, the opening of a film is really important because it sets the mood, it sets the tone, and it really should tell the audience what it's about in some way. And because I was exploring the relationship between the city and the team, I was really sort of thinking, all right, how do you best do that? And you know, sort of, film is sometimes a very instinctive thing. You kind of do something, you're not quite sure why you do it. But in this case, I thought, okay, it's like, let's think of this as opening day. See the city waking up, see Wrigley waking up, and then they come together. And that's really why I did it, because, again, it's those two things that come together and form really the spine of the film.
You've taken on, in the last two projects now, John Lennon and the Chicago Cubs, two subjects that people are very, very passionate about. Do you worry when you make these films that there's just going to be a whole host of people out there who are nitpicking, who are saying, you got that wrong, you got that wrong, you don't deserve to make a movie about John Lennon, you don't deserve to make a movie about the Cubs?
You know, anytime you do something that goes out into the public view, you're always going to have that happen. And you're going to have people that disagree, that don't like you for doing this or that. We got nailed in the New York Times on the Lennon film because we didn't deal with the conspiracy to kill John Lennon by the FBI. I read through all the files. There's not one shred of evidence that suggests it, but this writer thought so. And I guess you sort of end up developing a protective shell, much like Cubs fans do for the season. But you just sort of say, you know, I did the best I could. This is what I think. I'm proud of this film, and hopefully you will like it too. You know, and you sort of do it that way. But to speak to your question, Mark, I made a decision I learned a term when I went out to California from here, called a hack.
Okay.
Not a cab driver. It means somebody who does something just for the money.
Okay.
And I vowed I would never be one of those guys. And so you can look at all the docs I've made, and there's not one I'm not proud to have made. And they're all passions of mine. I love their work. I love their lives. I love the issues, whatever it is. And so I think I've got the greatest job. I get to go interesting places and talk to interesting people about interesting things and things about which I'm most passionate. I can't imagine a better job.
Who did you want in this film who's a big Cubs fan that you didn't get?
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray. Well, you can predict. He'll probably show up to the intro screening and do an introduction for the film. He'll just be like, I heard about this. Can I talk for 30 minutes?
I know his lawyer. That's right. Well, you know, that would be really nice. I would sort of like that. I know his lawyer in L.A. and I called up and I said, we're having trouble getting a hold of Bill. And he said, me too.
Well, I heard, what was the movie he made?
He was offered Little Miss Sunshine, and they couldn't reach him.
The part of the little girl?
Yeah. Yes, you know. Well, he's very chameleon, like Bill, you know. So we couldn't get him. He's one that we really would have liked to have gotten. For a long time, we wanted the mayor, and the mayor just kept saying no or kept not responding. And finally, he started to hear from some people that had seen sequences from the film that was actually pretty good. So we got a call from his camp that said the mayor would like to do an interview. So he ended up being the very last one we did about a month ago.
You weren't worried that he wouldn't be re-elected in the time that the film was made and came out?
No, but I came with a parking meter on my head. So.
You mentioned the idiotic fans, and that they do exist. And I remember only 15 years ago when I would go to Cubs games, you'd see all these like little old ladies decked out in all this Cubs gear, and it was so endearing and so great. And then tickets became more expensive, and the team became more popular. Is the experience of going to a Cubs game, and I'm sure you went to a bunch in the making of this film, do you feel it's the same as what it was when you were a child?
It's a different experience now in some ways. Yes, it's a little more upscale, all of that. But I have to say, you walk into that park and it's the same. And there's something, Steve Stone says in the film, there's something to be said for baseball the way it was, and going to a game at Wrigley is baseball the way it was. And it's so true. You get a feeling. Billy Williams told me, he said, you walk onto the field and you can feel the ghosts of all the players that played there. And I think that's true. And I think there's really something very, very special about that. I will say something about idiotic fans, though, because you're a Red Sox fan, so I can say that now. There was a film made a couple years ago called the Red Sox Movie, and it was really following around some nutty fans. And I was bound and determined not to do I don't like to be sort of critical of people. I much rather would celebrate something. And so we do interview a lot of fans, but the movie's not really about the fans.
Right.
It's about this love affair in all of its aspects. And we have some really interesting fans who have very interesting things to say. And you know, speaking, Mark, to what you were just talking about in a way, is that one of the things that does make Wrigley unique is you can actually be sitting in the seats that your grandparents and great-grandparents sat in, because the park is the same. And we spend quite a bit of time talking about the generational aspect of being a Cubs fan.
And we see that too. We see grandfathers,
fathers, and sons.
Yeah.
You know, which is really very interesting. I asked Costas. It's not in the film, but again, that's why God created bonus material. I said, "What do you think is going to happen when the Cubs win the World Series?" And he said it would be a lot like Boston. He said where he thought people will go out to the cemeteries where their parents and grandparents are buried, with the Tribune or the Sun-Times, and as the Cubs win World Series, and they would say, "See, you didn't get a chance to see it, but read all about it."
My son exists because of what happened after Game 5 of the series against the Yankees.
Is this more than I need to know?
Probably.
Okay.
You don't want to get negative. One person who does not get a mention in the film, Sammy Sosa.
Sammy Sosa, that's right.
Was that a conscious decision?
Well, again, we're not doing a history of the Cubs.
Right.
And I think if we'd done a history of the Cubs, that would have been part of it. But he's not with the team now. We weren't really dealing with those years. He's not really part of the psyche or anything like that. Ronnie Wu's not in the film. And I got great applause saying that once. That was a pretty cool thing. Ernie Banks is in the film. Billy Williams is in the film. Ryan Sandberg is in the film. Ron Santo is in the film. But they're not really talking about the 1969 Cubs or any of the other teams they were on. They're really more talking about this love affair. I think that's what we. I mean, we do talk a little bit about the history of the Cubs. One of the things we have, we found the earliest footage ever shot of a Cubs game.
It's incredible.
We found it buried in the Library of Congress, totally misfiled and mislabeled. And it's a game from 1909 at the West Side grounds here, and it's shot from up above. They got on top of the grandstand shooting down, then they shot from behind home plate. It's a wonderful piece of film.
Video. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, you know.
How can people see the film?
Well, thank you for asking.
Sure.
We are doing a benefit screening, one night only, next week at the Chicago Theater. At 7 o'clock is the first screening. That's the invitation only, but we are having a public screening at 10:30. Be the first on your block to see the film. We are now weighing offers for distribution, and we're hoping that premiere will actually bring us some more offers, and we'll make a decision. And we hope to have it out in movie theaters at the end of July, first part of August, and then DVD and television after that.
Once the season's already pretty much done for the Cubs.
Well, spoken like a true Red Sox.
John Scheinfeld, everyone.